This is the Picard Podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about episode 8 of Star Trek Picard, Broken Pieces. Welcome back, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about the 8th episode of Star Trek Picard, Broken Pieces. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Jolan True, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Welcome to this, our COVID-19 special. And we're better to have it than in the dark vacuum recess of space. Well, dare I say it, another planet. So yes, self-isolate and listen to our dulcet tones with this episode of Star Trek Picard. I am one of your other hosts, John.
And rounding out the trio, actually in a completely self-isolating in a whole other room, I am Chris.
You see, this is the pleasure of podcasting, isn't it? Keeps us indoors, keeps us talking about stuff we like. It's always good, right? We're not making light of COVID-19. We're just staying indoors, having a bit of fun. Hopefully you're enjoying watching Star Trek Picard, and hopefully you're enjoying listening along with us to our discussions about Star Trek Picard. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, make sure you do so over on our website at tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can also leave a voicemail with your thoughts on any of the episodes of Star Trek Picard so far. We're getting pretty close to the end of the series, so we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can also email us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with any of your thoughts about the episodes as well.
Yes, and we want to hear them all.
Absolutely. We haven't done this in a while, so on our main feed, so we wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you that support us over on our Patreon. I want to say thank you to Alice, Amy, Claire, Into the Night, John, Jessica, Oren, Rich, Robert, Steve, and Stuart for your support. As a thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon, we're releasing our dreadful podcast early for everyone to access over there. We're about halfway through these podcasts. This is our podcast about Penny Dreadful, leading up to the launch of Penny Dreadful City of Angels from the 26th of April. If you support us over there on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, you get access to all of those episodes. And it's been such a good fun rush going back to the horror of Penny Dreadful, hasn't it, John?
Oh, definitely. From scary, freaky dolls to vampires to the monsters and demons that lurk in your mind. Mm-hmm. All very, very, very cool and very classy.
Absolutely. The things that make John wake up screaming. I know you haven't joined us so far for those episodes, Chris. We're almost at the end of season 2 coverage at the moment as we're discussing them, but you will be on with us for our Penny Dreadful City of Angels podcast once we get to that, having a fresh pair of eyes looking at that show.
Or will they be dead eyes?
Oh, will I just be a skull? But then, yes, I will. When I get a chance, I will join. But I will definitely be there for City of Angels.
Excellent. And if you don't want to watch Penny Dreadful along with our podcast about it, it's available on Sky Player in a lot of Europe and in Netflix in some territories. I know it was available in Switzerland when we were watching on Netflix over there. It's also available on Showtime in North America as well. So you can watch the previous 3 seasons. I got a great deal in the Blu-ray. I got it for about 20 quid from a local provider over here, brand new as well. So for 3 seasons of a show, 20 quid's pretty darn good. So you may get a good deal in it as well. Check out your local markets and check out your local places where you buy DVDs and Blu-rays, but definitely worth buying. Really, really good.
Yes, no, definitely. Yes, I unfortunately did not see the deal until we discussed it later on, and it had gone up about 300%.
Yeah, it was up to about 50 quid afterwards, wasn't it? Yeah. But let's get into our discussion about Star Trek Picard, because that's what we're all here for, right?
Ah, definitely. What a great episode this was. Loved it.
So many reveals and so much answers given in this episode as well. So we're pretty much ready to run into the last 2 episodes after this one. I think we know all the things we need to know to get into the finale of the final section of the show, I think.
Or do we?
I think so. This episode was written by Michael Chabon once again, directed by Maja Vrvilo as well, former Gotham director, as we talked about before. Yes. This is her second episode of Star Trek Picard. John, do you want to give us the synopsis for this episode?
Sure. When devastating truths behind the Mars attack are revealed, Picard realizes just how far many will go to preserve secrets, stretching back generations. All while the crew of La Sirena grapples with secrets and revelations of their own. Narissa directs her guards to capture Elnor, setting off an unexpected chain of events on the Borg cube. Yes. The Cube. I was expecting to see Philip Schofield on it, doing his thing. For those of you who don't know... I was
going to say, that's a very British reference.
It is.
Right
for those of you who don't have access to The Cube, which is a British TV quiz show, all the participants are in a cube having to do various tasks in a given amount of time. And the presenter is... a presenter from, I suppose, my childhood era from the 80s with Philip Schofield and Gordon the Gopher. And then there was Ed the Duck as well.
This is making less sense than
I
more
know,
you
exactly.
tried to explain it.
It was like,
I just thought I would give some reference.
It was a man and his puppet. It was a man and his puppet.
But that wasn't involved in the cube. That makes the cube seem even weirder than
It does, actually.
It had nothing to do with a man and his gopher at all.
That's something that Richard O'Brien would do on the Crystal Maze.
It's like the first Saw, where they put them in a room and then they lock them up, and the first person who saws off their foot gets out. The English have a very dark sense of humour.
Well, apart from the sawing your leg off, that's pretty... It's at least closer to the description of the actual television show than the description that John gave. But let's get into our discussion about Picard, because that had absolutely nothing to do with the ITV show The Cube at all.
True.
We must face the ramifications of the Prime Directive.
Chris, do you want to kick us off? Because you have a question, really, for your Prime Directive, for your main point, which is right from the beginning of the episode. What's your main point?
Okay, so we were given answers, but at the same time, not really. I did question in the last episode, what is the vision that is given to Jurati, or shared with Jurati, and we do. More than that, we start to find out that it was a vision from a previous alien race from 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. Am I correct in saying that? Because Picard, towards the end of the episode, says something like that.
Raffi says it's 200 to 300,000 years ago, yeah.
Yes, Raffi. So they create a message in the stars to warn other people, because they had created synthetics who reached a point of overthrowing them, or war against the organics, and bad things happened.
Yes.
And essentially this was a warning. But who was this alien race? Why is there no other information on them? 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Well, when is that in terms of the star date? I don't know, work my way backwards. I'm like, okay, is this prehistoric time if we take Earth years?
I think so.
Yeah, we're talking, the current TV show Star Trek Picard is set just towards the end of 2399, which is about 400 years from now. So if we think 400 years, that's 200,000 years ago. So, so there's possibly time travel involved in that. You talked about that before in previous episodes, Chris, about the possibility of time travel coming into Star Trek, because it's happened many times before. So it's a possibility that some race went back in time and set this piece of information up for the Romulans to find. That's entirely possible. But they also created a display with 8 different stars, creating a system to display this warning for the future, effectively. So we don't really know. I suppose in response to your question, Chris, who is the alien race? My other question is, why trust an alien race you know absolutely nothing about, that's leaving behind this message?
That's putting stuff directly into your brain.
Yeah.
So, and again, we're told in this, not all of it is imagery. It's not a story. It's flashes. And we see some of the flashes. It's also a feeling and dread of knowledge. Like, they don't know the exact like they don't know. It's not like they're getting like a Wikipedia entry on the badness. It's like, here's the bad thing. Here's everything you need to know. No, it's like we see what looks like a synthetic skull that merges into a man. We see basically your usual mushroom cloud explosion in a yellowy orange. We see some very sharp geometrical shapes that are just kind of supposed to give you that sense of dread / kind of screaming / shattering of glass, etc.
Yeah. Now I'd say we as the audience, obviously of the TV show, aren't seeing what is being presented to the Romulans here, what's being presented to the Zhat Vash here. I think we're seeing a visual representation of it. I know that's probably quite obvious, but they're putting on screen some things that would indicate what's being shown to them, but they're getting everything. They're getting all this information poured into their mind. They probably didn't want people at home watching CBS All Access or Amazon Prime putting guns to their heads to kill themselves when they got this full visual impact of everything that's being seen, because we do see the impact of what happens to some people who are exposed to the full imagery effectively. So I'm sure they weren't showing us everything that's in there. I'm sure there's just some flashes of what's there for us to see.
Yeah, and maybe just given how some of them react to it in terms of committing suicide, battering their heads against rocks, or going mad, then maybe only some of the stronger minds, so maybe like Commander O is able to get the full picture, that it's too overwhelming or something like that, and shocking. Or I mean, we're just not getting the full sort of information from the show. They're giving us snippets of it,
but they're giving us the detail behind it. We're being told that this is a message from another race we don't know anything about, was massively advanced, built these synthetics, and they got to a tipping point and effectively destroyed that race. And this was the message left behind by them. So we don't know who this race is. It's not been given in the information that's there. But what we know is this is a massive warning for everybody else. Never get to the point where your development of synthetics could overthrow the people that created them. Effectively, is the warning that's there.
Yeah, and actually with Dr. Jurati, like, she is one of the main storytellers of this on La Sirena. So even though we just saw bits and bobs when she mind melded with Commander O, or should I say Commander O mind melded with her, then we only saw flashes, yet she's able to interject here and tell the story of this octenary system and the planets and all of that. So it seems like there is a full story there. We're just not getting it in imagery.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose I like this. I do like this. It explains a lot more to me, and I like that they open and show you the pool and ring that they touch and get the download. The only thing the hole, and it's a very small hole, it's a pinhole that I poke in it, is, okay, if I essentially take you guys out into the desert, get you to hold something, and it downloads some images into you, are you going to blindly follow basically what I put in your head? Or are you going to go, well, you probably have drugged me somehow and are influencing me, or giving peyote somewhere, Chris, stop kind of spiking our drinks. Like, you're going to... It's just, I suppose, it's the blind... So I understand for the Zhat Vash side, but it's the fact that Jurati... Now that we understand what was downloaded, I'm like, it goes directly against what she believes. She turns about pretty quickly when she meets Asoji, and she basically killed her lover, all based on what someone has just basically downloaded into her.
Absolutely. So there is a couple of things really that we learned from this episode from Jurati. One of the things that I didn't notice, because we've said it before, we've watched all the Star Trek episodes and all the movies and all that kind of stuff, but there's some things in Star Trek that may not make sense if you haven't watched them hundreds of times. So a huge thank you to some of the other podcasts I've been listening to about Star Trek. One of the things within Star Trek about the mind meld that's done from a Vulcan is they're not supposed to force it on anybody. If they force it on them, it's kind of like rape, effectively. So
wow.
The power that's involved in all of this information being forced into Jurati is massive, effectively. And Jurati says in this episode she also put a blocker so she couldn't talk to anybody else about it. Commodore O put a blocker there so she's not able to release the information to anybody else. So she was given this mission, forced to see these awful, horrible images of the destruction of worlds, effectively, and then told she had to go and kill her lover and couldn't talk to anybody else about it at all because of this blocker that was there. So there's some quite significant things that happened. It wasn't just she was told something or given a piece of paper and told to read something. It was a massive influx of information that she was forced to consume and then told to kill her lover and couldn't share it with anybody else as well. So a very difficult situation she was put in.
And it's also that it's Commodore O, head of Starfleet security here. So it's coming from a different place. This is a power relationship. She could get removed from the Daystrom Institute or whatever. There could be some kind of threat behind it.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And I mean, to the Chad Vash, I suppose this is almost like the coming of the apocalypse from the Bible or the equivalents in other religious texts. And I think that's one of the things about the whole Star Trek world and galaxy and systems is that whilst they are highly advanced technologically wise, there is also very much a strong sense of spirituality
Absolutely.
or religion, whether it's through Vulcans. I mean, weirdly, you don't really get that with humans, actually. You do occasionally, but that it's almost though that Starfleet is atheist. It is very science orientated. It's agnostic at best, and it certainly doesn't, at least at its core. Whereas, with things like, and I think a lot of the others, are as well, but obviously the Chad Vash is coming at it from almost a religious point of view, maybe more so than the Tal Shiar, a bit like the with the Klingons. They're very much around that kind of religious element.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
and I suppose good to point out, Starfleet themselves is an organization. They themselves are not religious based, but the people within Starfleet, the members of Starfleet, the officers, all have various different religions, but it doesn't form part of the Starfleet code, I guess you'd call it. One other final thing, Chris, before we move on from this one. Just remember the women that are there with Commodore O are people that are there 100 or 200 or 300,000 years after the first people that were there who saw this message. They're being brought there on almost a pilgrimage to see this thing, because we hear from Commodore O that's when the Chad Vash was set up thousands and thousands of years ago, and these are just kind of the latest recruits to see the admonition. So it's been going on for generations and generations. So I just thought that was quite interesting as well. John, do you want to take us on to your main point?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of discussed a lot of it, I think, but it's just this Romulan lore again. The Romulans call it admonition. That this octenary system, the Aya system, or the Grief world. I just thought it was really cool. I like the symbology, I suppose, of it with the 8 circles that Raffi see representing this octenary system. Just the fact that the Chad Vash cabal are going there. They're kind of keeping the purpose of this cabal alive with a fresh round. They're all women as well, which I find really interesting, because in the tales of the admonition that are coming from Dr. Jurati, what Raffi is talking about as well, it's all coming from a very feminine place, that it is the mothers of Romulan that went to this system because it was so unique, because of the 8 stars with this planet in the middle where they have this this kind of ring of, I suppose, apocalypse for all races, I suppose. And I just thought this was a really nice bit of lore coming from the Romulans, and it really, it really gave that sense of what drives the Zhat Vash. And I'm just wondering then if this cabal is a cabal of women, and I find that really a fascinating little development on the Zhat Vash as well. I think I love the fact that the system was built by these aliens that we don't know who are. It's centuries old, many centuries old, and that it's a warning, and it was placed there because it is so unique. And I just like how Raffi puts together as well that, that it's the Conclave of Eight. She thought it was maybe a group, the core group of the Zhat Vash in a conclave, where it's actually this conclave of 8 stars around the planet.
Yeah.
And so I thought this was all really good. I also was, given that Rhonda, who was a member of the Zhat Vash there, who at the start where you see her sort of going crazy with the information, I really like the idea that also now the Borg must know about this as well through the collective, that they have assimilated it, and this knowledge is also with the Borg. And I'm just wondering what is going to play out with that, given that 7 of 9 has effectively just hotwired a Borg cube, which in itself was very cool.
It was.
And just to what extent the Borg, given they are part robotic and all of this, they are cyborg, and they're part robotic, part synthetic. So I like how this is really developing the lore of the Romulans, but also then just within the story of this series. I thought it was really, really nice element to it.
Yeah. The organic part as well with the Borg as well, isn't that the other interesting part of it? Yeah, there's definitely some stuff to talk about with Rhonda as well. I know you're going to talk about that later on, John, because I can see your future points. Anything else within the starting of this episode, this octenary system and the race? Did it answer some questions for everybody? I think it answered loads of my questions.
Oh, definitely.
About how it all kicked off, really.
Yeah. But I am there with John that I'd like to know if this has anything to do with the creation of the Borg. Because I don't think they've ever fully said that. So, yeah, it would be very interesting to see.
Yeah. I'm going to take it on to my Prime Directive, my main point for the episode then, because it's slightly different. My main point for the episode is just the Picard and Soji discussion around the table. I really, really enjoyed this as a character moment for both of the characters. I just thought it was really intriguing to see how Picard is trying to encourage Soji into the fact that she may have just found out she's only 3 years old, but he says to her, you have a story, you just need to claim it, and gives her all the information about Data and who he was and the type of person he was after all the years he spent with him. I just thought it was a really good moment between the two of them, but also because it comes back from Soji as well. There's a really good relationship conversation. Remember, these two have only met, 2 or 3 days beforehand. You keep kind of forget that because we've seen her sister and we've seen her story playing out in the Borg cube for so many episodes. But having this moment between the two of them where she says, tell me about Data, and Picard is going through the bits he remembers, or the bits that were really important about Data, saying that he was brave and curious, he had a child's wisdom, he always made us laugh, except when he was trying to make us laugh, which I just thought was a really good representation of Data.
Absolutely.
He always wanted to be that comedian, he always wanted to tell jokes, but was never able to. And then she asked the question, did you love him, to Picard? And that's seemingly kind of an odd question to come from an android like Soji, but I love that Picard kind of has that moment of going, in my way, I did. And then she asks, did Data love you? And he goes, I'm not sure. He didn't have the same capacity for love as other people. That's one of the things we bonded over. And I just think that relationship between the two of them is kind of brought to the fore in this episode again. I think that's really nice to have him question the fact that other people would treat Data as not a real human when Picard is also someone that can't share his feelings in that way. I thought it was a nice little touch in the episode. And just a really good ending to the scene from Soji where she says, Data loved you. And once again, accessing another piece of information that she wouldn't know. How would she know if Data actually loved Picard if she doesn't have some kind of connection there? There's so many times in this episode where she picks up pieces of information she shouldn't know. And I think this is also one of them. Just a little underlining to the fact that she suddenly knows, well, Data did love you, even though she's never met him before. So there's a couple of other ones of those throughout the episode. But this scene for me was definitely my standout of the episode.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think what we had seen before with Daj activating, this is Soji activating. She in the last episode said she activated, or the episode before last, I should say, she said she activated, and they were afraid she was actually when she started punching through the floor. What's very much here is she's activating, quote unquote, from the access of previous memories and knowledge. This is one of the core kind of points where we see it, but they don't. It's not until later till they really call it out, where she actually calls it out herself.
Yeah. Like, how did I know that piece of information? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this, I think, is when I was watching it the second time, you're right. You see this and kind of go, yeah, how would she know that? Oh, okay, great. Because
it's one of those phrases that somebody would say to you, and anybody else having a conversation would say to you, no, they did love you. Even if you were talking about a grandparent or you're talking about a parent or something that you've lost, they would say that sentence, they did love you. But from Soji, it sounds like she's accessed a piece of her memory. That's the point I wanted to make, I suppose.
Yeah, I really like this as well. I thought it was a nice touch back with Data. And I like the point where Jean-Luc goes, his emotional wisdom was limited, not unlike mine. This kind of the stoic, standoffish Jean-Luc, and that he sees the similarity there with Data. Although he's not like Data. There are times where he's maybe too reserved, or he isn't able to put across his own feelings. So I liked where he pulls that similarity, but the curiosity of Data was really good, and it's great that you have Picard picking that out. The childlike wisdom as well is another really fascinating point. It is that children will speak it as they see it. So they're very honest, they're very direct and upfront, and in that in itself brings a wisdom. So I thought this was a really nice connection, and it's as well, it's just building the relationship between Soji and Picard as well, which we see right at the start with Will Riker's daughter sort of saying that, well, you've got Picard and he has you, and you can both have each other if you just allow it. And I think these are, some of those steps towards that, which is really good.
Absolutely. I love the kind of shortcut that she's trying to take to see if she can trust Picard, where she says, well, tell me what Data would think of you if he had the opportunity to tell me that information. And Picard has to kind of boil down their entire relationship into the sentence that he has where he goes, I hope he'd remember me as someone that believed in him, supported him when he needed, and got out of his way when he didn't need me. I kind of really like that fatherly kind of presence that he gives off in just that sentence to describe himself.
It's a really good scene for establishing their relationship, which they're going to have in the next 2 episodes, for sure.
And the next season, potentially.
And for the next season. And speaking of the next season, I just wonder whether maybe this unknown alien race might be explored somewhat in that next season.
Potentially. It's weird, isn't it? Because instantly I was kind of going, they were wiped out. The last person who was turning off the lights on their race is the person that left behind this warning to all future races going, don't let those sins take over, because you'll have to do something like this to warn future generations.
Yeah, so that's true as well.
Maybe they're all completely gone, of course. But we don't know. I think that's one of the things we don't know from the end of this episode as well.
True. But speaking of relationships, I think it's about time we move on to our Omega Directive.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
So, John, I know you wanted to talk about some relationships specifically for your Omega Directive, your second point.
Yes. I really like the fact that Rhonda from the from the Borg cube, the one who called out Soji as being the Seb Sheneb, the destroyer, is Narissa's auntie, Narissa and Narek's auntie, and I just thought that was a really nice touch point where they're around the circle, seeing the horrors of whatever this alien race has shown them, and she effectively then breaks down. And I think what the other part of this that I absolutely loved was Narissa, sort of just a very personal moment between Narissa. She is the ice cold Romulan Shatvash spy and operative, and here just being next to Rhonda while she's in bed, there's still a little bit of her coolness there going. She just thinks that there's no, the doctors have said there's no reason why you should be in this state, Auntie. I think you might be malingering, which is a great word. So she's not sympathetic to Rhonda being sort of in the hospital bed aboard the Borg ship recovering. She's kind of like, you need to get up now.
If you get up, I'll take you with me. Is what she's saying as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I really like that moment of intimacy between Narissa and Rhonda. I thought it was really nice seeing that other side of Narissa. It is that idea that stormtroopers too have families, and in this case, we get to see one of her family other than Narek, and it gives that different dimension to Narissa, which I thought was really good to see in the series. But I think the other element is just the way she says, you ripped apart the Borg cube by the sheer force of your despair, and this idea that this knowledge that drove her crazy, little did the Borg know what knowledge they were about to assimilate into their collective, and it effectively fried the Borg cube and effectively shut it down. And I think Narissa even says, they picked the wrong Romulan ship to assimilate that day. They should have picked mine. So
I love that she even goes, resistance is futile. She says the Borg phrase as if, I definitely would have been assimilated. All of us would have been assimilated. Yet you did this. You turned all of your other crewmates crazy because they shared this information that you were the only one that knew, and you destroyed a Borg cube by them learning the information. It's really interesting.
Exactly. So I like that concept that the assimilation by the Borg of this individual, this Romulan Shatvash operative Rhonda, effectively caused them to give up, and the assimilation of that knowledge was too much even for them. And so it's just a nice kind of idea. I like that, just because the Borg is always so often portrayed as being just this relentless cube of a collective. It is it's almost that sort of stereotypical American fright of communism, or dare I say it, socialism, the collectiveness of people working together. And I like the Borg in that vein as well, of being unstoppable. But I like the idea that this single person, through her own knowledge, which is what the Borg are after in assimilating them, their culture, their knowledge, their technology, that was their downfall. They were almost too greedy. They didn't know what they were getting.
Well, once again, it's like the virus that's come in and affected them all. It is the Independence Day thing. They didn't know what they were taking on board to their collective, and then suddenly it breaks them apart, severs them from the actual collective of all the rest of the Borg, and, as I say, destroys the minds of the other Romulans when they learn the information as well. It ties in really well to that opening scene that you guys talked about in the first point, that this piece of information can drive people to kill themselves. I love that if you see those two scenes back to back, if you just look at that opening scene and what's happened to the Borg now, you would see that it has driven some of them mad. It's driven the collective to break apart. I think that's really kind of cool to put those two together by the 8th episode of the season. Chris, anything on that point, or do you want to take us on to yours?
No, I'll take it on because it's somewhat similar, which is bye bye Borgie. And if any of you have any old 60s family members, there is a film called Bye Bye Birdie, and it has been playing in my head non-stop since all the Borg were dispatched into the ether. Bye bye Borgie. And if you want to hear more of those dulcet tones, go check it out on YouTube. But no, on all serious fact, I did like, that sounds quite morbid actually. So we now know the Borgs were in stasis. They had the Borg, the remaining Borg of the cube weren't just walking around. They were in stasis. They were deactivated, if you will. And Seven was able to turn them on, to a degree.
He's always been good at that.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Phrasing.
Yes. I think Elnor had a bit of that as well.
Well, are you going to assimilate me now? Anyway, back to the thing. I did like the fact that Narissa basically vented them into space and was able to destroy a fair portion of this Borg cube, because I was expecting as soon as Seven turned them on, that was it. I was like, okay, so the Borg are going to overrun this and take control, and it didn't happen that way.
Yeah, it seems like a really quick way to deal with the Borg in here. Now, it's very rare that that a character in Star Trek would walk aboard a ship where every single Borg is in stasis and they just, open it up and everybody disappears out into space. But it seemed like a push red button and everybody gets ejected. It seemed really quick to deal with this massive threat, or something that I thought definitely. And as you were saying, Chris, it sounds like we all thought Seven's going to take control of them, and that's how they get the ship back, and they're going to take over the Romulans and kill them all and take them out. But none of that happened because of one red button, and off they go out into space. The only other thing that was in my head this whole time was, hang on a second, Seven's just reactivated collective, set herself up as this kind of micro collective leader, connecting herself to the minds of all of these Borg who are now jettisoned out into space, screaming as they die, effectively. So is that going to have some kind of effect on Seven when she returns to herself?
It looked like it when she connected in the Queen's chamber, that that had a big effect on her.
Yeah.
I mean, it was cool. I loved the hot wiring of the Borg cube by her, and just the chain, that mechanical voice coming through, that really recognizable Borg voice coming through of 7 of 9,
and the green light comes up in the eye.
I think,
as well. So cool.
Yeah, I mean, even the XBs as well. Just like Narissa was heartless, just going around and blasting them, and a gun breaks halfway through.
Yeah.
So like, I thought that was really good. Yeah, I mean, similarly, it was. They literally collectively go, "We are Borg," and then you kind of like want to go ... flying through space, because unfortunately they just they all go. Maybe there's a few left, I'm sure, but I think maybe because the cube hadn't fully repaired itself. There's that great moment after 7 of 9's connected herself in where she starts repairing the Borg cube, and it's regenerating. It's almost like bugs going in and going into place to repair the shell. So like this Borg cube wasn't fully regenerated, I don't think. And I think if it had have been, maybe when they hit the red button, they wouldn't have all been flying out into space. I think it was the fact, some of the earlier episodes, you see there's a significant portion of the cube that has got a force field around it to keep the pressure.
Yeah.
And obviously to keep space out. So I think that's the reason maybe why a lot of them are, if not all of them, have gone on to be little Borgy pops. Or Borgisicles or something.
Borgsicles.
Borgsicles. Yeah, that works.
In space.
Yeah, I really loved that that scene of the nanobots. I guess they were resetting back up the Borg cube and
really
knitting it back together. I thought it was so cool use of CGI.
I literally thought we were going to get this epic space battle to a degree. I do feel slightly lied to. The trailer I saw for this episode last week had a lot more action, and it was God bless that editor because he spliced a lot of it really well. Like, so the ship's leaving at the end with the nanobots, with the odd bit of phaser. Like, he cut it, and I was like, oh my God, we're going to get an epic battle, Starship versus Borg Cube. Like, oh, this is going to be... Now, we may get that in the future.
Yeah. No, this was definitely, he put every bit of action into a 20-second trailer from a 58-minute episode.
Yeah, he literally cut it so well, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It wasn't, I'm not upset, I'm just disappointed. I feel like his mother. I was just like, yeah, you took all the good, you took the best parts and you edited together, which is your job.
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, genuinely, Chris, I can't complain about this guy's editing. We did Gotham for 5 years, and we eventually got to know the guy that did the edits for the Gotham trailers, and he basically used to take the last reveal at the end of next week's episode and put it in the trailer for next week. Every week for 22 episodes, you'd get the reveal at the end of the following episode would be in the trailer for the episode. So you'd be thinking next episode is when Joker appears in the episode, and that would be the last 30 seconds of the next episode, and then the character wouldn't appear for like 7 or 8 episodes or even a year after that. So I understand the feeling of trailers letting you down, definitely.
Just one final thing on this, just the death of the Borg and the effect on 7 of 9. But I was also thinking that as soon as she connected in, that she would change anyway.
Absolutely.
And whether, she would then moving forward, because I didn't think she would be able to reconnect in that way. Just because you saw the eyes go black and have the green sort of speck in the middle. Then I just kind of thought, 7 of 9 is going to revert back into a Borg state. I don't think that's going to happen because of the collective being jettisoned out into space and because she's obviously been able to disconnect herself. But still, I'm half expecting that this will have done something.
Some effect.
Both the death of all those members of the collective, but also just reintegrating herself back into the Borg matrix.
Absolutely. Well, let's put together just that kind of conversation she has with Elnor, because he's the person that she's speaking through it with. I love the conversation really where she goes, well, I could connect back up and I could turn on the collective and get all these Borgs going. And he's like, yeah, definitely do that. Do that and we'll all be saved. It's great. But then she says, but I don't want to reconnect them to the collective because they've been severed, and that's something that we all try and attain. We all try and get away from the collective. And then she says to Elnor that maybe I wouldn't want to let them go if I joined the collective and became effectively the new Borg Queen, right? But when she's released at the end, and I think she is released from it, I'm not sure whether she specifically finds a way out of it. The final words that are said are, Annika has more to do. And then she's released from being the Borg Queen or being the leader of the collective. So it feels like Annika's missions are something that she was able to convince the collective to let her go to pursue those missions that the Borg couldn't do themselves, or something like that, potentially.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's like she's been released from it rather than her breaking her way out, or maybe she used the imagery that was in her head of of the good that she's doing, saving the XBs or helping the XBs out to get herself out of the situation, something like that. But yeah, I'm just wondering the screaming of thousands and thousands of former XBs, or even these XBs in stasis. What's that going to do to her mind? I'm just intrigued to see if that's going to do something for her in the future.
Oh, she's just going to go on vengeance rampage.
Absolutely,
I would say so.
We saw her literally walk with 2 rifles at the end of an episode. This is going to be 2 rifles plus a bazooka / whatever other phaser bazooka they can get.
Or just one massive Borg cube that she still has control of that she could be taking on a vengeance spree across the galaxy.
True.
I'm going to talk about the other section of the episode because I really liked that they laid out what was going on with Rios and what was going on with the synths and the connection now to Picard and his party with Commodore O. I just called this 5 hollow helpers in a conspiracy. I just thought that worked as the explanation. I like the opening of this really when we see Raffi going and talking to one of the hollows on the bridge and saying to him, this could be a really bad thing. Unless you like giant, all-encompassing conspiracy theories, then it's kind of awesome. So we got to get that. Finally, Raffi is getting to the point where she's going to lay to rest all of these conspiracies that have been in her head about the Romulans being involved in this attack on Mars. That's been driving her crazy for 15 years and pushed away all of her family. We've seen that throughout the episodes. And finally, just by a casual conversation with one of the hollows, she suddenly picked up this nugget of information and she's not willing to let it go. I think that's really intriguing because it shows you the character of Raffi and it shows you why she would be the number one to Captain Picard after Riker was gone, that she would be so tenacious in her investigation of this. It also leads to the really fun scene of Santiago Cabrera playing all 5 of the hollow versions of himself as well. I think he does such a great job. Nice touches there for Star Trek where we have the engineering hologram being Scottish, of course, after Scotty.
Yes.
Nice little touch there. We have also got an Irish one on there, possibly a reference to Chief Miles O'Brien as well, maybe.
Most definitely.
Yeah, has to be a reference to Miles O'Brien. But he was also an engineer, so they couldn't have 2 engineering holograms, I suppose. But I do like the discussion between all of them where they're trying to put together this, and we find out that what's actually happened is back in the days of the Ibn Majid, the former starship of Rios himself, the captain had met 2 synths that had come on board, killed both of them because of an order that had come from Starfleet, and then killed himself. He took his own life, and then Rios had covered the whole thing up and removed all of these memories from the hollow duplicates, but hadn't done it well enough, so each of them had a little piece of the memory. These are the 5 broken pieces as named in the episode. So I really like that, but it's great to finally get that story put together for us of what happened to Rios and why he is the person he is now, and why he wouldn't have the belief in Starfleet that Picard had indicated he had in the past. He seemed like a very competent Starfleet officer when Picard was talking to him. He said, "You can see it in you. You are Starfleet." But he turned on Starfleet because effectively they turned on him. They forced his captain to kill 2 synths coming on board.
Yeah, and they forced a cover up as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this first of all. Yeah, the 5 hologram scene with Raffi is just great. Mm-hmm. It's perfectly done. I love the fact she's piecing together a puzzle. She's doing this investigation. It really, as you say, it shows so much about her. And also what we're finding is Rios's story, what it is that he has gone through. And I thought this was really good. It's the story, and it's really getting to the basis of it. I like the fact that it's Commodore O again. I keep wanting to call her Commander, but Commodore O is the one that gave the instructions and the order to his captain Alonso Vandermeer, and just that you have as well this first contact with the synths again. So we see that, I really like that, as Soji is beamed aboard the La Serena, and you see Rios's face, that recognition etched on his face, and then he kind of goes AWOL in his quarters, and he's leaving all the holograms to run the ship. And Raffi is trying to connect in with all the holograms, but also then into Rios. And I think... that moment where he pulls out the piece of paper and it's got that picture of someone that looks just like Soji, but in fact it's another synth from this first contact moment, this diplomatic contact, and Jana, and also Beautiful Flower was the ambassador or something, or the diplomat.
So one thing I wanted to point out about the 2 synths that came on board, we have Jana, who looks exactly like Soji, and they mention one called himself Beautiful Flower. So this is not another duplicate of Soji and Daj and Jana, this is a male synth.
Yeah.
Yeah? So someone completely different, something we haven't seen before. It opens up a wide, wide world of possibilities now, because we've been told right from the beginning that there is a Soji because it's a duplicate of Daj. There's always two. Now we find out there's a third in Jana, and now we find out that there's a male synth as well, calling himself Beautiful Flower. So this could be an entire race, an entire species of various different versions of synths that were built by Bruce Maddox on this planet, not just that he created two synths side by side in Daj and Soji, and not just that he created an entire race of people that looked like Issa Briones, the actress who plays all of these. There's possibly loads of different variants and loads of different versions of them, which is, I think that's just a massive eye-opener from a very small dropped line in a scene.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I suppose they're created as in pairs, as twins. Yeah. And so that off a template of some description, whether it's, I suppose referenced kind of with the wooden doll from a few episodes ago. But also there could be other templates that are being used then to form other types of synthetics. So I thought that was really good. I think, this all connected in really nicely for me. I do also like the fact that Raffi, in doing her investigation, needed wine to sort of deal with it, except she had turned off her replicator from giving her wine because, she was drinking whiskey at one point, so she just thought it'd be better not to have the wine. But of course,
no alcohol at all.
No alcohol at all, but
yeah, even turned off the meta instructions to that she couldn't turn off her ability to turn off.
Yeah,
this thing
no, exactly. Well. It was that was a fun little bit.
Absolutely, one other fun little touch at the end of it, that final phrase that's said by, let's say, Scottish Hollow. The Scottish hologram, the final phrase that's said to Raffi, where she goes, "That's not even English. It is in fact Esperanto." That he speaks the what's that, the universal language that was supposed to be in place for every person in the world. He speaks a little bit of Esperanto, where he's effectively saying that Rios has gone crazy, he's gone mental. Now that he drinks, nobody can understand a thing that he's saying, but he's saying it in Esperanto, and nobody can understand him except obviously the other holograms. So nice little gag there at the end.
Definitely. Great moment in this episode. All of that stuff aboard the La Serena.
That's it for point number 2.
Make it so, number 1.
John, what's your final little moment from the episode to discuss?
Huey is dead. Long live Elnor. Yes, I really liked Elnor in this. It was just, first of all, I just loved his big hug of 7 of 9 when she comes and saves him from the Romulans sent to get him by Narissa. And then I think we touched on it before, but where he says, "Are you going to assimilate me now?" And he just says it with a cheeky smile to 7 of 9. I presume thinking, he's fresh off the planet. He's been with nuns for most of his life in a disciplined world of kind of like a martial art and a sort of a combat cult of learning swordsmanship and all this kind of thing, and maybe he's just starting to wake up to the other wonders of the galaxy and the star system. So I just really I like the innocence of Elnor, but I like the fact that episode by episode, there's just a little bit more that he's exploring, that he's discovering. And of course, the final frontier is not just simply about space, it's about personal inward discovery.
Am I boiling down your point by saying that you're shipping Sevenor at the moment?
Sevenor, maybe, maybe.
Is that what you're shipping at the moment? Okay.
Well, I'm probably shipping Elnor, but I can ship Sevenor as well.
Nice.
But mainly just Elnor.
I think he was great in this episode. I really liked the innocence of him is coming back into the episode. We talked about it before, this idea that he was a kid taken away from his parents or lost his parents, had to live with these nuns for those many, many years. His only father figure left him behind, and now he's going out into the universe alone. And he does want to be the fighter. He is a very powerful fighter, but all the rest of the stuff is the innocence. He is a little bit of that Data character for the show here, where he's kind of exploring things for the first time. So yeah, he's really good in this episode. You're right, that hug that he gives Seven as she arrives, where she's just kind of like, get off me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're supposed to be a warrior.
Yeah, these two could work really, really well, because 7 of 9 is awesome, and I think having that sort of clingy sidekick would be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll take back kind of what I said previous episode. Like, okay, I won't take it back. I'll walk back some of it in that I didn't want him to see that stark shift in terms of him kind of cradling in the corner. The innocence he has here is more childlike, and it does then reinforce that piece. Which basically, we hadn't seen that such a childlike wonder and understanding of the universe.
Yeah.
Even though he is an amazing fighter, he is quite sheltered.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the bit that we're now seeing more of. So as I see more of it, I understand the character better, and I'm okay with what they had done last episode and this episode.
Yeah.
So like the strange hug of with Seven.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes more sense now.
Yeah. Chris, what's your final little moment to discuss about?
For me, is Jurati's forgiveness. Essentially, she has Dr. Adradi has fully confessed to the murder of Maddox. She says and agrees that she will go to jail on Deep Space 12. And they all kind of just are like, all right, you're going to go to jail, but you'll turn yourself in. Great. Sit here out in the open with us. That's usually what confinement in a room or a brig is for.
Maybe, yeah. It's a small ship.
I'm a bit like...
Send her downstairs to eat cake for the next week instead of putting her in the brig.
Exactly. They kind of... Maybe she's not forgiven.
Yeah.
But she's reintegrated with the crew pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm like...
I don't think she's forgiven, because I think it's clear that we're going to Deep Space 12 and you will hand yourself over to the authorities for the murder of Bruce Maddox. So, like, Picard is pretty clear about that. The only reason that they ultimately aren't going to Deep Space 12 is because Soji effectively hijacks the La Serena, and I think
Your trag's so high.
I know
To not say the La Serena.
the La Serena, and I think she's down with them because ultimately this is where Raffi seems to get everyone together to pull all the pieces. So all of a sudden, Dr. Jurati is feeding her knowledge from that mind meld into the whole conversation, because it even goes to, we didn't mention it before, but that with Commodore O, she's a Vulcan and a Romulan. She's mixed heritage of Vulcan and Romulan, and that she rose through the ranks, and that actually, yes, there is confirmation here that she engineered the attack on Mars with the synths. So she's kind of bringing all this additional exposition, I suppose, to Raffi's findings with regards to the Black Flag incidents aboard the Ibn Majid. So, yeah, I know what you're saying. It seems weird, but I think she's still pretty on the outs, but I suspect over the next few episodes she will have to prove her worth again.
Yeah, and I can see it going two ways. The ultimate sacrifice, I've done lots of wrong, so I will sacrifice myself. Or that it will be kind of forgotten. Yeah. I don't know if they'll be allowed to forget it, though.
I think the description in this episode, as we talked about earlier on, the description in this episode that the information was forced upon her and then blocked within her mind as well to kind of drive her to do what she was being forced to do. I think that also plays into the understanding, I suppose, from the rest of the crew of what happened. It's not that she off her own bat made this decision, it's that she was also forced as well. So I think that does play into some of the forgiveness that could be there, because if the same thing had happened to any of the other crew members, they may have done that as well, you know?
I get that. Then Narek is still following them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not explained.
Oh, of course not.
So,
that's the big cliffhanger at the end of the episode. Is it Narek or is it Narissa?
So I'm
course,
like, how did he start following? So is she, because she was able to walk around the cabin,
mm-hmm.
did she just ping him? She's go, hey, I'm back out of it. I had to get them off my trail. Yada yada. So is that another reveal? It's just like,
I don't think so, because the injection that she does in the previous one is to deactivate or mute the signal. So now that she's up and walking around, so as her body gets rid of the substance that she injected herself with, maybe this nanotechnology is reactivating in her blood system that allows Narek to then, the signal comes back on his sensors. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know whether she has actively been in touch with Narek, because I don't even think she knows who he is.
I don't think she's even been alone since she woke back up. Basically, I think somebody's been covering her the whole time since she came back. I must say, I know that we haven't got it as a point, but I love her conversation with Soji, where she's so impressed with what Bruce Maddox has done, creating something really unique. You know, the whole thing about Data was that he always stood out in a crowd. His skin was different from everybody else's around him. Whereas I love that she says Bruce Maddox has created not only an amazing work of science, but a work of art. I would never harm you in the future, because this is something she's always tried to attain. I think that's another lovely moment in the episode as well.
Yeah, I think what's really good about that moment is, you know, she's looking at all these human attributes, or biological attributes of thirst, of hunger, of tiredness, of blemishes on the skin, as you say, what she describes as artistry, but it's all coming from a technology point of view. And so she calls it out, but do you actually see me as a person in reality, or is this just, I'm a technological wonder, effectively? But you're fascinated with how it's camouflaged, in a sense, not that I could be a sentient being that Picard believes that they are, and they have that right of their place in the galaxy and in the system. So I like the fact that even though she is absolutely fascinated with Soji, it's one purely still of coming from technology, from a techno point of view.
Yep, it's like that happy feeling I get when we get a new TV or a new console. I'm like, oh, it does all these. Do you drink TV? Oh, that's so cool. Oh, can you do this? Oh, that's so cool.
Don't ever make your TV drink, Chris. That will definitely set it on fire.
It will fall over and smash.
Or it will set it on fire, one or the other. My final moment, my final small bit from the episode, just because I know Steve Brown had sent us a piece of feedback back in episode 2 about Picard's speechifying. That's how he was introduced to Rios by Raffi, was that this guy likes to make speeches. And I love that in this episode he has 2 moments where he tries to make a speech, and just as he's getting his wind up, he gets stopped during the speech. You know, he's talking to Clancy and trying to convince her to send some of Starfleet to come and help them out. She's already made that decision, but he doesn't stop. He's like, if you're going to tell me no, I'm going to shout at you even more, basically. And she's like, would you just shut the hell up to him?
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's like she feel, you could see the weight of relief that she's probably been wishing she could tell Picard to shut the hell up
for years.
Yeah.
Well, it's just that moment because he's so got that such a righteous indignation built up because she's told him no once before and he's expecting her to do it again, basically. But she's like, "Shut up! I've got it done. It's on its way to you." Will this cause problems again between him and Clancy if he's not waiting for her at Deep Space 12 since they've gone off running again? So did he mend a bridge, and then the bridge got busted because they're off on the run again. I'm intrigued just to see is there going to be something playing out from that in the future. But also his conversation with Rios, where he's having this really good heart to heart with Rios, where he's saying, the future is ours to write. Fear is the great destroyer. And just as he says that, he's interrupted once again. He's in another big throw of a great Picard speech and cut off again. So really like those moments in there. I think it's just a little touch to the show that Picard's not allowed to just monologue throughout his episodes. So he has to do other things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really nice, in fact, it's a great speech, that one with Rios. It is almost a shame it was cut off. It does feel pertinent, dare I say it. But that we lost our curiosity and we gave in to fear. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's real next generation inspiration for a better future.
There's
Definitely.
our Picard. There's our Picard. So guys, any points, Easter eggs that you noticed in the episode that we haven't talked about? You've already mentioned that Narek's ship is about to follow them into the Borg transwarp conduit at the end of the episode. That was just a little nod, just in case we hadn't talked about it. I wanted to make sure that we had it in our end points in there. Just one moment that really stood out to me. I'm a massive zombie fan, as you guys know, and I'm sure I've talked about it many, many times in the podcast. But that moment with Narissa being overwhelmed by the XBs as she gets knocked to the ground and they all are heading towards her face just before she gets beamed off, that totally felt Dawn of the Dead to me. That really felt like the zombies were just swarming to eat their victim. I just loved how it was put together in that scene. I thought it was really cool.
100% is you can shoot the many, you can shoot the few, but we are many.
There you go, exactly. We are Borg, we are zombies. One other one, and it's probably just me, that moment with Picard not knowing how to use the navigational holo computer just reminded me of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. With Coulson and Ward trying to use the holo table without their engineers around and trying to use it, not having any idea how to use it. Some people have their functions on a ship. The captain doesn't have to know how to do everything, basically, but hilarious as Picard's like, we're off, we're ready to go. I have no idea how to use this thing.
Yeah, it's really, but it's also, I was like, that's not your chair there now, buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're not in control. You're not the captain anymore.
It's like my mum with the remote control still, or her mobile phone. It's like old people with IT skills.
Don't you often wonder what they do when you're not there? Because you're not there every day, and they've watched television programs when you're not there, and they've made phone calls when you're not there. How is it that they can't work them when you are there?
It's because we're the comfort IT blanket.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think our parents are just trying to make us feel useful.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it is. One final Star Trek reference that was in there, just Rios saying, it's like the Zephyr Cochrane warp drive. When you cross that line, somebody shows up. He's talking about that idea that when the synths cross a certain evolutionary line and get to a certain point in their evolution, that something's going to turn up. The destroyer is going to turn up. Just that Zephyr Cochrane warp drive line that he was talking about was when they eventually achieved warp speed. That was the first time the Vulcans arrived on Earth to make first contact. They waited for humans to cross that line of evolution that took them into warp to turn up. So just an interesting little callback, the way he described it as the line that you cross.
Yeah, definitely.
Shows up. So that was just a nice little touch there. Overall, John, what did you think of Star Trek Picard Episode 8, Broken Pieces?
Oh, I love this episode. I'd give it 5 black flag incidents out of 5.
Nice.
It was really exposition heavy, but I absolutely enjoyed the exposition. Mm-hmm. I loved the story of what happened to Rios, of Raffi trying to puzzle this and investigate it and bring it all together. With Jean-Luc and Jurati and Raffi and Rios and Soji all around the table, really explaining then as well the 8 stars, this octenary system, just the connection with the Chad Vash. It felt that a lot of stuff came together in this episode, and I felt massively satisfied by it. So I absolutely loved this episode.
Excellent. Me too. Really, really enjoyed it. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Same. I think it's picking up. The guy who edited the trailer can rot in hell. But no, as you said, it was exposition heavy. I was expecting an action heavy. So was I disappointed? No. Yes, maybe. I think I was expecting one
Pick
thing.
one.
Yeah, you choose. It's a multi-choice.
No, you choose.
Oh, no. I was not disappointed.
They did the Steve Jobs of giving you what you didn't want, but turned out to be what you needed, right?
Yes, exactly. It's exactly that.
There you go.
So yes.
Excellent. Let's get on to some feedback. Thanks so much for all of your thoughts about this episode. You can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or join us over in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries and share your thoughts over there. First up, over on Facebook, Brian Malosh says, first reactions, I loved it, but I still have questions. What about the supernova? Did the Romulan Zhat Vash create that too? Or was it the Conclave of 8? It didn't seem like a coincidence. Will the fleet never arrive? Will Clancy be dead next week? Dead at the hands of Commodore O? We sure did have a lot of F-bombs in this episode, didn't we? That was a record. If you told me 24 years ago back at First Contact, I'd be sad that Borgs got spaced. I would have thought you absolutely crazy. Also, 7 proved resistance is not futile. That had to have been Narek and the other ship at the end of the episode, right? One other thought. If Commodore O gave the order for Vandermeer to kill the ambassadors in the same system, wouldn't they have already known the location of the nest? It seems to me that the Romulans were deceived by the Conclave. In my second watch, I caught that the synth in the vision is Data in a frame or two. I loved so much about this episode. My favourite scene, though, might have been Raffi meeting with the holograms. That was great. Thanks so much for that, Brian. On Commodore O giving the command to Vandermeer to kill the ambassadors, the 2 synths that arrived, my feeling was that they were ambassadors. They weren't in the same system where the rest of the synths would be located. They were out of that system and met the Ibn Majid in another system. So I'm not sure whether they could have tracked them back to where they came from. But I watched it a couple of times and couldn't see any other information given in the episode about that. But any perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I kind of felt the same thing. It felt like it was a chance encounter, actually, but not one that was close to their homeworld. That maybe they were coming to meet them away from their homeland, a bit like the Vulcans coming to Earth after sort of detecting the warp drive. So it could have been more along those lines, I think. And Brian, totally agree with you around the idea of feeling a little sad and distraught with all the Borgs flying into space. I certainly was not expecting that, but yeah, I think I'm there with you as well.
Yeah, meanwhile,
sure.
Chris is singing show tunes as they float up into space.
Exactly. Yes. Oh god, I think I'm dead inside.
I think you might.
I think you may
might
have
be.
died a little bit, Chris. Yes.
As for the F-bombs in the episode, I mentioned this to Brian. He already knows my feelings about this. This is a show for adults. We've got a protagonist who's in his 90s here. This is not for kids. I can't imagine a 16-year-old sitting down going, I want to watch that Picard show. Oh, the one with all the cursing in it. That one's not for you.
It's got Grandad in it.
Exactly. So I have seen the complaint out there about Star Trek shouldn't have cursing in it because the Star Trek of the 80s and 90s didn't. Well, that's not what I would expect from this show. It feels like you'd be cutting off people's emotions by not getting a person who's really angry at something not being able to curse in it.
Exactly.
Like I do every week with the podcast.
It's like, it's real. You know, it's... I like Admiral Clancy just purely for her F-bombs.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have people that are going to be effing and blinding all the way through because there are those people.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think we may be slightly desensitized as well, living in Ireland, where that is possibly used more.
I think it is,
in normal conversation, which is great, expressive.
By not doing it, you're cutting off your collective despite your Borg.
There you go. And there's also the entirety of the Disney catalog that doesn't do it. So you're now losing it from films that they now own. They're cutting out curse words in those films. Let's be realistic. This is a show for adults. It's got to have adult language in it at times because adults speak with adult language. Chris, do you want to take us on with the next piece of feedback?
Yes, we got some feedback from Donald Dennis, who said, it feels a bit like a video game plot. I mean, I liked it, and I'm still all in, but this could have been lifted right out of a Mass Effect style game. Also, I think it very odd that the Borg don't have 0G boots on as part of their sleep cycle protocols. They have to have been breached in parasave mode before.
I don't think they have.
I loved the Mass Effect trilogy. It's odd though. This whole series feels like it is stolen bit by bit from other stuff I really like and written to a very reasonable formula instead of coming all from just good storytelling. That may have been exacerbated by the weekly nature of the show when I'm used to it in that all-you-can-eat buffet style of a binge. Sadly, it also looks like there's no way Rios is a hologram, but I think it was you who predicted the holograms were all going to be uploads of the Captain. You get at least one gold-pressed internet point for that prediction.
Woohoo! That's one I have.
Derek. Yeah. The scene of getting all the holograms together was probably much better on paper than it turned out on screen. I still liked it, but it's not 100%. I'd give maybe 80% effectiveness. Maybe I only feel that way because Orphan Black has done it so well.
Nice.
Also, the Borg Queen is dead. Long live the Borg Queen.
Nice.
Yes. I agree with you on Orphan Black, but I still really enjoyed this Rios, and Raffi scene. In terms of the Mass Effect, I know what you're coming from. I don't want to do spoilers in terms of... There is a direct correlation to what he's talking about here and what we see in this scene or this episode, the information it's given us, and the overall plot thread of the Mass Effect trilogy.
Right.
There is some, but
where did Mass Effect get it from?
It's like Isaac Asimov has discussed this before about the...
Or even the next generation, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. So there are no original ideas in life anywhere. Everything is just ripped from... Like, if you want to do something... Remember, like, there's a whole Simpsons did it in
That's
Family
true,
Guy?
yeah.
Or, sorry, South Park. Simpsons did it. There are no... It's just how you put it together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like there are no original ingredients, but when you put them together in the right way, you get a cake, and you put them in another way, you get like a crepe. It's always going to be slightly different.
Yeah. I mean, I love the Mass Effect trilogy, so I'm loving having that style and feeling a bit from Star Trek Picard, because I think I think it feels right for modern space adventures. Like I really like The Expanse, so that too has that kind of feel to it. So for me, it feels appropriate to have that kind of vibe in Star Trek Picard. For me, for sure. In terms of whether they've stolen anything, I wouldn't necessarily go that far. I think they may certainly be. I think they're stealing from Next Generation and meeting new worlds, new species with old adversaries. So I think they're doing it in a really good story, to be honest, in that sense. And I think it's ultimately playing out really nicely. I'm really enjoying the story of Star Trek Picard.
All right, 2 more episodes left. Really looking forward to the rest of them as well. Just to mention, I had actually spoken to Donald on the Facebook group about this element of the holograms not being 100%. The reason why I had the discussion was I had noticed a couple of moments in the scenes where some of the holograms didn't appear in the background of some of the scenes, and it's one of those ones where you're going, yeah,
I didn't notice that.
It's just one of those ones where you're going, look, it's a TV show, and this was a moment, and there's 5 different versions of this character on screen at the same time. So when you're trying to get all 5 of them, all with different costumes, remember that as well, and different haircuts and different accents and all that kind of stuff, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 moments where the editor goes, I don't have all of the footage that I need, but this will work, this will be okay. It's just 1 or 2 moments where someone was supposed to be in the couch in the background and didn't appear there for a millisecond. But you can totally put up with it on a TV show budget, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like when they did this in Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe was looking exactly the same in almost every single one of the 7 parts he was playing in that scene as well. So doing this whole scene with 5 different characters, I think you can kind of let him away with that on a TV budget, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great feedback, Donald. Thanks for the feedback. Also to Brian. We have some more feedback through from Jim Carey. He gave us his thoughts. He said, wow, phenomenal episode. I must watch it again. A relief from last week's episode, definitely my least favourite of the bunch so far. This may have been chronologically longer than others, but the story itself was fast-paced with such crunchy, munchy substance. I kept thinking, well, that's a real nice ending, good cliffhanger, and I would see there was 20 minutes left. Hot damn. Such confluence of action and the cross-cuts between the conversations on the ship leading the viewer along, not pushing. Later, the summary with multiple voices forming a narrative. I could wonder if the writers realised they had wasted time and had to cram a bunch, but no. I'm now used to some stories like the penultimate episodes of Game of Thrones just have high impact or epic weight. Early in the show, nice nod to Stargate's replicators. The usual Borg regeneration was more organic, like vines growing out and sealing gaps. Some slightly take me out of the moment with obvious CGI. I'm growing weary at the hologram control things, most of them anyway. 7 of Annika had a crazy cool version. Stunning, masterful, more please. I'm just rewatched The Next Generation, The Chase. For such a niche episode, it spoke of an ancient race with vast capabilities to program DNA in multiple races. This reminded me of that story. Oddly enough, the 2 races that at least hinted at long-term progress were human and Romulan.
Ooh, deep cut.
Yeah, really. Thanks so much for that feedback, Jim. It's really good to hear your views on this. Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed this episode. I like what you say about the crosscuts between the conversations, kind of bringing the viewer along, and a nice little reference to The Next Generation with The Chase about the ancient race with vast capabilities. Yeah, no, that's a good little touchback to TNG for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jim. Claire Owens also says, it's interesting that Rhonda saw the vision and was driven even more mad by it. I'm guessing that she is the reason the only XB Romulans are all insane. It's a little bit of a strange one, unless I'm missing something, that she broke the cube, but the only XBs she seems to have affected or really broke are the Romulans. Out of all the, hundreds of thousands on that cube, they've been able to salvage some, not all, because of Rhonda. I'll have to go back and check some screen grabs, but the circle she drew over and over was the same circle as the Jet Vash were stood in. Forgive me if I'm asking obvious things. My husband says I'm terrible for that. Not obvious things, I don't think. You know, we'd mentioned back a couple of episodes ago that they were repeating this idea of the circles, this image that Rhonda and the other Romulans were drawing over and over again. And then we even saw Raffi, when she was connected into the Borg cube, she was looking at that same image of those drawings, and she pulled that out when she was talking to the holograms in that episode, that she'd seen this image of the octenary system, these 8 stars forming this shape. So it definitely was there, and it's definitely something that you're supposed to have noticed over the last couple of episodes. I think we talked a little bit already about the why the Romulans were driven insane, not the other people, because they were on Rhonda's ship and they were driven insane as they were being converted, I think, is the reason why they're all insane. But we may see more of that in future. But
yeah, and it's the now that they've been converted back, they're having maybe a Romulan psychological break, as much as the process of converting them from being a Borg to a non-Borg. And they also still have the memories of knowing what Rhonda saw in the circle. And I think for the other Borgs, they've kind of been shut down almost because the collective has been torn apart in a sense. I think.
Exactly. Thanks so much for the feedback, Claire.
Yeah, thanks so much, Claire.
Final bit of feedback is from the awesome Steve Brown.
Hey, TV Podcast Industries, this is Steve. I hope I get this in time. I'm going to send you one thought, and then I'm going to send a voicemail over to Picard Cast as well, because I love both these. Both y'all's podcasts are just amazing about Picard. So I guess we got the answer to our question that SOS that that Elnor found was Hugh's, that Seven had given him at some point in the past. So now it makes sense. He wasn't just some random place on the cube. He was in, as I think the Romulan said it, that he was in the former director's chambers or whatever. So that would make sense that they had met and that Seven had given him one of those little SOS things. And that then Elnor would go there and would happen to find it. So, okay, thanks. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much for that, Steve. Yeah, really nice that they kind of underlined that, because I know everybody, I think we were really confused about that as well. How did Elnor get his hands on that in that specific moment? How did he get access to this thing that could call the SOS? But it makes a lot of sense that she would have given one to Hugh, since he's also a former Borg like Seven, right?
Yeah, and it does look like, in the previous episode, it did look like he found it just randomly hanging beneath the thing, and he presses it.
Yeah.
But it makes sense that he's in Hugh's office. So.
Yeah, and I think when 7 of 9 turns up to begin with, she does ask, "Where's Hugh?" So she knows he's there.
Exactly.
They're good friends.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much, as always, for the voicemail, Steve. Great to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. And again, thanks to all our feedbackers. Great to hear your thoughts on all things to do with Star Trek Picard.
Absolutely. One last thing to do, as always, before we close out the show. We're off to 10 Forward for the pub quiz question. John.
Yes, just like Ireland, whilst most places are on shutdown, the pubs are still open.
Of course.
So yes, slap on some hand sanitizer, put on a hat, get your Uridian tea, whatever the temperature, and join us here in 10 Forward for this week's pub quiz question. So, this week's question for episode 8. How many holograms meet with Raffi? What are their functions? And what are the names of the 3 we already know?
Ooh, interesting. Yes, we get a few new names in this episode, don't we?
Yes.
And one of the name that isn't called out, I think, in this episode is from an earlier episode, and we talked about them in a lot of the podcast. So yes, we don't have specific names for all of them, but the ones we know is what the ones we're looking for.
I'm even trying to wonder whether I have all the correct functions for them, but I think I do.
I have them written down in front of me here.
Don't worry, we got you. We got you, boo.
I could send my screenshot out to the group over on Facebook, but I won't spoil the questions.
No, let's not. So remember, fellow pub quizzers, this is the question. How many holograms meet with Raffi? What are their functions? And what are the names of the 3 we already know? Please send your answers through to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can send them at once or separately each week, whatever you want to. And of course, this will be for some Star Trek Picard goodies. Yes. So just a quick reminder of those goodies, I think, as well. There is a Star Trek Picard Federation badge that Derek actually picked up at the Picard European premiere. We have...
I didn't steal it, I was given it at the premiere.
No, exactly. Yeah.
He picked it up. 5-finger discount.
Exactly. A locket of Patrick Stewart's hair that he's...
If I had a locket of Patrick Stewart's hair,
that'd be
that
impossible.
Would be worth millions.
Yeah, that would be almost impossible. Obviously, we are doing a 10 Forward pub quiz here, so there is a Picard beer steiner as well to slurp your beer of choice as you listen to our podcast in the future. And then there is the official behind-the-scenes book. Just on the book's release date has been delayed till April 26th. So we will send all the goodies out all at once the book has become available. We have it on pre-order, but yes, just to say, we will send it out once we have all the goodies collected together.
Absolutely. So the person that gets the most questions right on the 10 Forward pub quiz wins those goodies. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next week for Star Trek Picard Episode 9, Et in Arcadia Ego, Part 1, written by Michael Chabon, Ailith Windeman, and directed by Akiva Goldsman.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Remember, you can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, where we are right now covering the Penny Dreadful Series 1, 2, and 3, and you can hear the dulcet tones of my famous co-hosts. But not me, because I'm apparently lazy. No, in all serious facts, these guys are doing a great job, and we have Ray from Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast, joining us as special guest, going through the Dreadful podcast. Not dreadful by name, dreadful by nature, but actually really good one to listen to.
There you go.
So jump over and have a listen early, and make sure you check out patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, where $1, €1, £1, or whatever you got in your pocket goes a long way to help us keep the lights on, the server running, and the podcast mics hot.
Bye, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies. Keep watching the stars. And remember, a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day from all of us here in Ireland.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Do you know, I really don't know how to work this. But once I find out, we'll be back to speak with you again soon. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and engage.
Excellent. Chris actually forgot it was St. Patrick's Day next week. I could see his face when I said Happy St. Patrick's Day. Chris, do you want to say Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody now that you've realised?
Happy St. Patrick's Day. I think my Irish card needs to be actually revoked. Holy God, I forgot it was. The COVID lockdown has got me going like, what day is it? Yeah, you know, Christmas time when you don't even know what day it is anymore.
Absolutely.
And you're like, is it like a weekend? Is it a weekday? I'm like, it's Paddy's Day next week. Oh my God. And by the way, that's Paddy's, not Patties. There is no Paddy's Day.
There is no Paddy's Day.
It is St. Patrick's. There are Paddies.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Chris has got cabin fever, of course. And of course, why was I... Grab yourself a pint of Guinness for the 10 Forward Pub quiz, not Iridian tea. Oh my goodness. Yes. Well, no, grab a rake of Guinness to slosh down so that actually you forget the pub quiz question. And yes.
See, fellow Trekkers and Trekkies, if I don't write it in the notes, the guys don't even know it exists. So St. Patrick's Day may not have existed this year. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again next time. Bye.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Bye.
Sure to be sure. Aye.
See,
See, John's been getting lessons. Bye.